The walk starts in Kinlochleven and there's a West Highland Way sign. We'll be heading north. That's looking back towards the village, not the way I'm going. And that is the way ahead. And there's a horde of West Highland Way walkers. This is where the West Highland Way leaves the road. And there's a West Highland Way sign. Now in the woods, climbing out of Kinlochleven on the West Highland Way. There's one of the West Highland Way thistle signs. And that's the way ahead, still climbing through the woods. The West Highland Way is now starting to ascend very steeply. That's looking back down to Kinlochleven, and there's Lochleven. And over there, but of course shrouded in cloud, is the path of Glen Nevis. As you can see, the high tops are cloud covered. The West Highland Way becomes one of their marvellous cobbled paths, which are extremely hard to walk on. Great view over Kinlochleven. There's a decent view looking along the length of Lochleven. And there's the West Highland Way ahead, still climbing. And look at those peaks well in cloud. Now joining the old military road. Now looking along the glen that the West Highland Way traverses. Just look at that view of the West Highland Way rushing through this glen. Glorious. A rushing stream by the path. That's the way ahead. That's looking back along the glen, the way I've come. As you can see, the weather has improved. The ruined farmhouse of Tyno Schubach. And there's the way and hordes of walkers on it. That's the way ahead, along that clear path. Incredibly peaceful stream next to the West Highland Way. And there's the way ahead. Now all the other walkers have gone, it feels wild and remote, and the path is quite wet in places, as you can see in the foreground. The West Highland Way continues through the glen and continues, well, it's starting to rise again. It hasn't risen for a while. The West Highland Way is now on a slight shelf, still heading along the glen. Just look at these glorious views. And there, of course, is the way ahead. Even more superlative views ahead. This looks like where the way is going to start entering woodland. Well, it is woodland, felled woodland. It's a dreadful landscape. There's the way ahead. Now leaving the lunar landscape of felled trees to enter conifer woodland. Still on the West Highland Way. Sadly, I spoke too soon. After about 10 yards of the conifers, there's another open felled horror landscape. Now a view opens up to Ben Nevis with the clouds still skirting over the top. That's the narrow way ahead. There's Ben Nevis, it now looks cloud free. and there's the West Highland Way ahead. There's the West Highland Way ahead, and Ben Nevis summit is well cloud covered again. Now in the thick forests along the West Highland Way, approaching Glen Nevis. It's been raining slightly, only very lightly. And there's Ben Nevis, a cloud coming down. And now a steep descent on the West Highland Way in the forest. After a steep descent, the route crosses a stream by this fascinating rock. It's been raining much more heavily. And there's the way ahead. Now on a narrow path through a dark forest. Now the cloud's really down over Ben Nevis, although it looks like it's clearing in this direction a bit. And there is the way ahead, still through this forest. It seems to be going on a very long time. The West Highland Way is diverted along this monstrosity of a path. From this vantage point there's a great view of Ben Nevis, still patches of cloud over the summit. And over here you can see the early stages of the infamous mountain track up there. I'm zooming in. That's the path up towards the halfway Lochen. There it is going down to Achintee. Confirmation that we're still on the West Highland Way. And that awful path is the way ahead. Now rapidly approaching Glen Nevis on a much better path. Here's where the path turns right down to the road in Glen Nevis. And there's the path bearing right down to the road, complete with a West Highland Way sign, one of the thistles. I've now arrived at the road through Glen Nevis, and as you can see from the sign, the West Highland Way turns left along this. It follows it all the way into Fort William. But I'm going to cut across to Achintee, which is a far more pleasant. Now on the suspension bridge over the River Nevis. There's the river. Now look at the weather, absolutely phenomenal. These are the peaks further away from Ben Nevis. Here's the sign at Achintee for the start of the Ben Nevis Mountain Track. And that's the start of it. I've come up the Ben Nevis path a bit. As you can see, it gets cobbly and rocky, but I can't go any further at the moment because it's 6:30 at night. Now on the road from Achintee into Fort William. I've rejoined the Glen Nevis main road and have come to the end of the West Highland Way sign. And a welcome to Fort William. I've just got to walk into the centre of the town.